Let's start with Vegetation and Wildlife. Part 1. The Ecological Map and Classification. This chapter is not really about memorizing forest names. It is about learning the environmental logic behind them. We'll first build the rule that decides vegetation. Then, we'll map India's 5 major vegetation types. After that, we'll move forest by forest: evergreen, deciduous, thorn, montane, and littoral, and finish with the policy and data side that UPSC quietly tests. Once that structure is clear, the map stops feeling random. So, what decides vegetation? Natural vegetation is a plant community left undisturbed over a long period, long enough for species to adjust to the climate and the soil. And the rule is simple. Climate, meaning rainfall plus temperature, along with soil type, gives you vegetation type. That is the core equation of this chapter. Vegetation is not random. If rainfall changes, temperature changes, or soil changes, the vegetation pattern changes with it. Most students try to learn forests as separate boxes. That is wasted effort. Learn the environmental inputs first, and the classification follows on its own. Now apply that logic to India. India's natural vegetation falls into 5 major types. First, tropical evergreen and semi-evergreen. Second, tropical deciduous, which further splits into moist and dry. Third, tropical thorn. Fourth, montane. And fifth, littoral and swamp forests. The map logic is worth locking in properly. Vegetation lines broadly follow rainfall lines. That is why the Western Ghats and the Deccan Plateau look so different on the vegetation map, even though they are close to each other. One gets heavy orographic rain. The other lies in a drier rain shadow setting. That single comparison can solve multiple map-based questions. Let's begin with tropical evergreen and semi-evergreen forests. The conditions are strict. Rainfall above 200 centimeters and temperature above 22 degrees Celsius. That immediately tells you where they belong. The western slope of the Western Ghats, the northeast hills, and Andaman and Nicobar. Now notice the structure of these forests. There is an emergent layer, often rising above 60 meters. Below that is the canopy layer. Then the understory or shrub layer. And finally, the forest floor. This vertical layering is the hallmark of dense, humid forests. Key species given here are rosewood, mahogany, iny, and ebony. And here is the point most aspirants miss. Evergreen does not mean the trees never shed leaves. They do, just not all at the same time. So the forest keeps looking green throughout the year. That is the evergreen myth you should not carry into the exam. Now we move to the most widespread forest type in India. Tropical deciduous forests, also called monsoon forests. These occur where rainfall ranges between 70 and 200 centimeters, and they split into 2 clear subtypes. Moist deciduous forests occur where rainfall is about 100 to 200 centimeters. The regions mentioned are the eastern side of the Western Ghats, Odisha, and the northeastern foothills. Key species are teak, sal, shisham, and sandalwood. Then come dry deciduous forests, where rainfall falls to around 70 to 100 centimeters. These occur across the peninsular region and in parts of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. The landscape becomes more open, almost parkland, meaning trees with grass patches in between. The key species here are tendu, palas, and bell. This is where most students lose easy marks. Teak is deciduous, not evergreen. That one confusion shows up again and again. Now let's go drier. Tropical thorn forests occur where rainfall is below 50 centimeters. So the vegetation has to survive water stress for most of the year. That is why the adaptations matter more than the names. These trees are often leafless for much of the year to conserve water. They may have succulent stems, meaning thick water-storing tissues. and the undergrowth is usually tussocky grass, which can grow up to 2 meters. The key species you need are babool, bear, wild date palm, kher, neem, and khejri. Do not describe thorn forests only as desert plants. The better answer is low rainfall, water-conserving adaptations, and scattered xerophytic vegetation. That is how a geographer frames it. Now we move from rainfall-based forests to altitude-based forests, the montane forests of the northern mountains. Here, vegetation changes with height. From about 1000 to 2000 meters, you get wet temperate forests with species like oak and chestnut. Around 1500 to 1750 meters, pine forests become important, especially cheer pine, which has strong commercial use. From about 2225 to 3000 meters, you move into blue pine and spruce. Then, from 3000 to 4000 meters, you get alpine forests with silver firs, junipers, and birches. Beyond that comes the snowline and tundra. And there is one more term here you should know properly. Transhumance. It means seasonal migration of pastoral communities with their animals. The slide connects it with alpine pastures and tribes like the Gujjars and Bakarwals. So montane forests are not just a vegetation story. They are also a livelihood story. Now compare that with southern montane forests. The southern mountains, the Western Ghats, Vindhyas, and Nilgiris behave differently because they are closer to the tropics and generally lower in elevation, with an average of around 1500 meters. So the lower slopes stay subtropical and only the upper parts become temperate. That is the tropical difference. Now comes the key term, sholas. Sholas are temperate forest patches found in the higher parts of the Nilgiris, Anaimalai, and Palani hills. In simple terms, they are compact montane forest pockets surrounded by grasslands in the southern highlands. The economic species mentioned here are magnolia, laurel, cinchona, and wattle. Do not confuse sholas with Himalayan alpine forests. Different latitude, different altitude logic. Now we come to littoral and swamp forests. This is the wetland and coastal vegetation category. One important fact comes first. About 70% of wetlands are under paddy cultivation. So not every wetland remains natural vegetation. Now to the core vegetation here. Mangroves. Mangroves are salt-tolerant species, which is why they dominate in tidal, brackish, deltaic environments. India is said here to have about 7% of the world's mangrove forests. Key sites you need are Sundarbans, Bhitarkanika, Chilika Lake, and Keoladeo. And note this carefully. Keoladeo is a freshwater wetland, not a mangrove site. One more map point matters. Mangroves are not confined to Sundarbans. They also occur in the Mahanadi, Godavari, and Krishna deltas. That is a classic prelims trap. Let's shift from forest types to a data distinction that trips up a lot of serious aspirants. Forest area is not the same as forest cover. Forest area is defined by administrative records, usually revenue records. It may or may not actually have trees on the ground. The number given here is 23.28%. Forest cover, on the other hand, is defined by actual canopy presence, usually through satellite data. That is the ground reality. The number given here is 20.55%. So one is a legal administrative category, the other is an ecological reality. Now let's look at distribution patterns. The highest density is in Andaman and Nicobar with around 87%. The lowest density is in Lakshadweep, which is marked here as having 0% forest area. Then comes the broader pattern. There are 15 states with high concentration above 33%. At the other end, you have what the slide calls the Plains Gap, especially Punjab, Haryana, and Rajasthan, where forest share is below 10%, largely because land has been heavily cleared for agriculture. And then there is the Northeast, where many states are above 30%, helped by hilly terrain and heavy rainfall. This is the correct way to read India's forest pattern, not as one national number, but as a strong contrast between islands, hills, plains, and the Northeast. Now we move into policy. India's forest policy evolves here from the 1952 policy to the 1988 modified policy. And the philosophical shift matters more than the dates. The direction changed from the old British-style commercial exploitation model towards sustainable management. The key target was clear: bring one-third or 33% of the geographic area under forest. And the purpose had three layers. First, environmental stability, restore ecological balance. Second, conservation, protect biodiversity and genetic pools. Third, social needs, meet the fuel and fodder needs of the rural population. This is where policy becomes much more than plantation. It becomes ecology plus livelihoods. Now that policy is clear, let's decode social forestry. Social forestry, introduced here through NCA 1976, means the management and protection of forests on barren lands for social and rural development. And yes, NCA stands for the National Commission on Agriculture. It branches into three types: urban forestry, green belts, parks, roadside avenues in cities; rural forestry, which includes agroforestry and community forestry; and farm forestry, where farmers grow trees on their own land for commercial or non-commercial needs. Do not reduce social forestry to planting trees. That is too shallow. It is about location, ownership, and social purpose. Now let's unpack rural forestry properly. First is agroforestry. This means trees and crops on the same land. The idea is simultaneous output: food, fodder, fuel, and timber from one land use system. Second is community forestry. This means trees grown on public land, such as pastures, temple land, and canal banks. And the key social point is important. This benefits landless groups, people who do not own private land but still depend on common resources. Most students understand agroforestry. Fewer understand why community forestry matters. It matters because forestry policy is also about equity. Now let's lock the revision sheet. Evergreen forests need more than 200 centimeters of rainfall and give you species like rosewood and ebony. Deciduous forests occur under 70 to 200 centimeters rainfall and are the most widespread, with teak and sal as major species. Thorn forests occur below 50 centimeters rainfall, with acacia and cacti-type xerophytic forms as the signature logic. Montane forests are altitude-based, with pine, deodar, and sholas as key identifiers. Littoral forests are linked to wetlands and coasts, with mangroves, especially Sundarbans, as the standard example. And the policy goal you should never forget is this: 33% national forest cover, tied to the 1988 policy vision. This chapter is not about memorizing 5 names. If you understood India's ecology through rainfall, altitude, soil, and human use, you are exam ready.